something that I noticed today, and that is, this morning I noticed as we were worshiping that there were 3 people who were doing things that had not been doing those things ever before here in Grace. Nelson was drumming, Tracy was singing, and Shondor was in the back doing our PowerPoint, and I think as new people step into new things, we should celebrate that. So thank you.
I'd like to make a special announcement, and Diane, would you like to stand up, please? I'm grateful that this woman is a part of my life now, and she actually led me back to the Lord.
Amen.
Just another reason to celebrate. So before we jump in, we're starting a new series called Extraordinary. And it's a 4-week series, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that in just a minute. But before we start, let's just gather ourselves and just take about 30 seconds. And oftentimes I find it's helpful if I'm trying to just clear my mind a little bit and not be distracted, that I just close my eyes. And in the 30 seconds that we quiet ourselves, I want you to just talk to God as honestly as you know how. You might be in a great place, you might not be in a great place. But when we gather for worship, the great hope is that God meets us in the place that we most need to be met. And so I just want to invite you to do that. Let's take 30 seconds and then I'll pray, and then we'll jump in, okay? Lord, we quiet ourselves because we so often miss things that you have for us. And when we miss them, Lord, most of the time we don't even realize it. There's so much that you have for us, even now today. And I'm just asking that you would take the little bit that I offer and use it to bless and to feed and nourish those who are here, that would help them in the place they most need it. And God, that today as you move among us, that somehow, some way, our life will be different as a result of being here. Better, richer, fuller. That will be more hopeful. And so we just invite you to do what we have no idea how you do. We invite you to do that now. And we open ourselves as best we can to you for that to happen. In Christ we pray. So I was thinking about this new series, and I went through about 4 different titles for it. Like, it's oftentimes when I have an idea for a series, I will get sort of the substance of it before I can figure out how to frame it. And I went through all these iterations, and then one day I was just not thinking about it at all, and this word, extraordinary, came to my mind. And I thought to myself, that's it. That's exactly, it captures exactly what it is that I want to try and do over the course of this month as we move into September. Now, this word extraordinary, you probably are all somewhat familiar with it. You've heard of it, I would imagine. Webster describes it as an adjective that is used to describe something or someone that is uncommon, unusual, remarkable, or exceptional. So as we're getting started, what I want you to do is I want you to think about anything or anyone that you know, that you have seen, that you would describe as exceptional. For me, I so often feel like I'm surrounded by ordinariness. Like, it's just you wake up, you start your day, you move into a rhythm, you do what you did the day before with tweaks and whatnot. But sometimes things just become familiar until you stop long enough to realize that you are surrounded by things that are extraordinary. And the trick is just to be present to those moments so that as you see them or you experience them, they can fill you with gratitude and wonder and awe. And you don't get to this place where you get stale and old and brittle and cynical, because none of us want to be like that. So I was thinking about things that I have seen in the course of my life that are extraordinary. I remember one time I was driving in Montana. How many of you guys have ever been to Montana? It's one of those beautiful places in this country, even in the world. And the sky opens up. It's called Big Sky Country because it's just, you can see for miles and miles and miles, just totally flat. And there had been this huge thunderstorm. And it was crazy. You could see the lightning streaking across the sky, and everything opens up, so there's no blocking of this great storm. If you've ever been in like the middle of a storm, it's just powerful. And so as I was continuing, I could see in the distance as I made my way through the storm what looked to be the hint of the beginning of a rainbow. The closer I got to it, the more brilliant it became. But what I realized is it wasn't just one, it was two. And they came across each other, and it was the most brilliant, beautiful thing I think I had ever seen. It was just wonderful. It was extraordinary. And then I thought about times where I have been able to snorkel and scuba and things like that, and to see colors under the ocean that I don't think exist above the ocean. Rich and beautiful coral and fish and life that has colors that I can't even describe. But if you snorkel and scuba in places that you've been fortunate enough to see it, you will realize it's just extraordinary, it's remarkable, it's uncommon. I once saw a double amputee finish an Ironman triathlon. 2.4 miles swimming in the ocean, 112 miles on a bike, 26.2 miles running. Double amputee, extraordinary, remarkable. Saw the birth of all three of my children. Extraordinary, remarkable, unbelievable. So many things that I have seen. And I've met a lot of extraordinary people. You know, people who have lots of things, like super smart or super athletic or just gifted in a variety of different ways, maybe incredibly wealthy. But you know, when I was thinking about people, extraordinary people, really what came to my mind most had nothing to do with intellect or wealth or power or any of those things, even athleticism. Mostly what it had to do with was character. When I think about the people who've been most extraordinary, who have most spoken to me, who've most impacted me, it's had something to do with the way in which they live their lives. Once upon a time, I was making a visit to a lady who was really not in a very good place. She was in a hospital, and she had been there, and she was getting ready to be discharged, but the doctors didn't really know what was wrong, and so it wasn't much better leaving than when she came in. This lady didn't have two nickels to rub together. She was completely poor. And in fact, she was on charity care. She didn't even have insurance to take care of the cost of her stay. And just about as the time she was ready to leave, I was there as they were getting her ready to discharge. She had this exchange with her roommate. And as she was talking with her roommate, she reached into her bag and she opened up her wallet and she gave her all the money that was left in her wallet because the lady who was going to be discharged later didn't have a ride home and she needed to get a taxi cab so that she could go home. Now, that was extraordinary generosity. She didn't have anything, but what she had, she totally gave it to somebody that she had just been in a hospital room for maybe like a day or two. Didn't know what she was totally pregnant. But more than that, just before she left, she also gave this lady her cane that helped her to walk, to steady herself. And I thought to myself, she's crazy. What is she doing? She's giving away all her money. She's giving away her support, her ability to even make her way out of here. And I sort of pulled her aside. I said, you can't give her your cane. I said, you need your cane. And she said, well, they're going to wheel me out of here. They're going to wheel me to the curb. I'm going to get home. And when I get home, I'll figure it out. God will provide. That's what she said to me. And I thought, that is extraordinary. What incredible generosity of spirit when you have nothing to somehow find something to give to somebody who has even less than you do. I also saw about a month ago when I was finishing up my Little League coaching stint we were making our way towards the championship. We lost in the finals of our district championship. I saw a little 12-year-old boy who saw two teammates who were so distraught and disheartened because they thought that they had cost their team the championship. After the game, go over to them in a quiet moment and put his arms around both boys and take responsibility for things that he didn't even have responsibility for, just so that they would feel better about their part in the loss. And I thought to myself, that's extraordinary. What incredible strength of character. And you know what? He's 12 years old. It doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of intellect. It doesn't take a lot of athleticism. It doesn't take a lot of beauty to be extraordinary. And I've witnessed it, young and old, black and white. I've witnessed it over the course of my lives, and every time I see it, I'm struck by it, and it makes me think, I want to be more like that. I want to be more humble. I want to be more generous. I want to be more kind. I want to be more patient. These things speak to me. And I know they speak to you. They ennoble you when you witness it. And you want that for yourself. And you know what? It's available to us. If only those people who had lots of money and possessions, things, beauty, athleticism, if extraordinary was reserved only for them, the rest of us would be in sorry shape. Most of us. But extraordinary character is possible for every single one of us. And that's what I want to talk with you about today. So if you have your Bible, start with John chapter 13. John chapter 13. I'll talk to you about extraordinary character. Now, this is going to be a very familiar story to many of you. For some of you, it might be brand new. For all of you, I want you to, as best you can, to discipline yourself to hear it as if you were hearing it for the first time. Because what I found is that when you hear something that you already know, you tune out to it. You say, God knows. And maybe you do, or maybe you don't. Maybe when you pray for God to take whatever it is that I offer and His Word, maybe when we pray and ask Him to do that, maybe He will. But in order for Him to do that, there has to be an openness of spirit. There has to be an approaching of, you know what, I'm ready, I'm open. Speak to me about whatever it is that you want me to hear or see. So there's this final meal that Jesus is getting ready to have with His disciples before He is taken into custody and ultimately led to His death. It's a Passover meal, and they are celebrating this together, and all of the arrangements have been made for them to have this one final meal together, except one. See, it was customary in that day that when you were going to have a dinner party, that at every dinner party there was always a servant or a slave or somebody who was hired, that when the guests came in, that they would help them to take off their shoes, they would wash their feet, they would dry their feet, and then they would make their way to the table so that they could eat without the stench of their stinky feet messing up the dinner. Right? Complicating this reality was that in that day when they ate, they would recline at the table. So if you're reclining at the table, inevitably your feet are going to be where? In someone's face or close by. So if you've not, with open-toed sandals, walking through dusty, sandy roads, there's no pavement, right? If you've been walking on your journey to the place where you would come and have a meal, it is likely that your feet would be dirty, they would be sweaty, and they would be stinky. Now, who wants to eat a meal with somebody's dirty, stinky feet in their face? None of us do. And none of them did either. So they're getting ready to have this meal, and the only problem is that the detail that was left out for this dinner was that there was no servant or slave there to wash the disciples' feet. And so they don't. Instead, they gather around this table, reclining at their positions, waiting for somebody else to do what was theirs to do. And not one of them moved. Not one of them. Now you would think that in this situation, that at the very least, one of them would take leadership. Simon was a zealot, right? So he was zealous to do lots of things. Someone would think that maybe you would at least see one of them wash their own feet. Right? Wouldn't you think? And then by that example, another would wash their own feet, and they wouldn't have to wash each other's. They would only just have to wash their own. But they didn't. Because in side conversations, the Gospels and many accounts will tell us that you would find them arguing with one another as to which one was better or greater or more of Jesus' favorite. They had a different ethic in mind, and that ethic said, this work is not for me. This work is for somebody lesser than me, which is you, but it's not me. And so we get to this place where Jesus comes to the table and the food is served and nobody can budge. And Jesus is going to do something extraordinary. And I want you to hear what John has to say about it. John chapter 13, verse 1. Before the Passover celebration, Jesus knew that his hour had come to leave this world and return to his Father. He had loved his disciples during his ministry on earth, and now he loved them to the very end. It was time for supper, and the devil had already prompted Judas, son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had given him authority over everything, and that he had come from God and would return to God. So he got up from the table, he took off his robe, he wrapped a towel around his waist, and he poured water into a basin. And then he began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that he had around them. For all of the talking that might have been going on in and around the table, even arguing about who should do what, can you imagine that when Jesus got up that things got quiet? That when he filled the basin, that he took off his outer garment, that he kneeled down, he got to the first disciples' feet, that it would be like dead, still silence, you could hear a pin drop. Can you imagine how embarrassed the first disciple must have been when he got to them? Thinking to himself, what in the world is going on here? I never thought it would come to this. I thought Peter, I thought Andrew, I thought Bartholomew, I thought somebody else would do it. And now Jesus. You see how mortified and humiliated they may be, realizing that their master, their Lord, was kneeling down and washing their dirty, stinky feet. They had every opportunity in the world up to that point to do it, but they didn't. With arms crossed, they resisted an opportunity to be extraordinary. They were just like one another. They were just like everybody else. They were waiting for somebody else to do it for them, when they had it right within their grasp. Can you imagine how any of the 12 would have been recorded in their memory if they would have been the one to stand up and do this? Can you imagine how we would reflect on them historically? They missed the opportunity. Jesus did not. So he gets up, he takes off the outer garment, he becomes their slave and servant. This is going to be a problem. This is going to be a problem because now the disciples are embarrassed, they're mortified, and they're going to resist, or at least one of them will. At least one of them that we're told about. Who knows, maybe John resisted too, but he's writing a book, so he just talks about Peter. It's very possible if Peter had something to say, he might have recorded John's resistance as well. And knowing him, he probably would. So we get to this place of resistance in verse 6. It says, when Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, Lord, are you going to wash my feet? Jesus replied, you do not understand what it is that I'm doing, but someday you will. No, Peter protested, you will never, ever, ever wash my feet. And Jesus replied, unless I wash you, you won't belong to me. Simon Peter exclaimed, then wash my hands and my head as well, Lord, not just my feet. Jesus replied, the person who has bathed all over does not need to wash except for the feet to be entirely clean. And you disciples are clean, but not all of you. For Jesus knew who would betray him. That is what he meant when he said, not all of you are clean. Imagine when he got to Judas, knowing that he would betray him. My temptation would be to just skip over those feet and go to the next pair. Imagine washing the feet of the one who was going to betray you after you've invested 3+ years with them, you've given them everything. He washes his feet too. He gets to Peter and Peter has a fit. He can't let it happen. Why? I don't know. I can only speculate. But perhaps he doesn't want it to happen because he thinks Jesus is above that. He doesn't think he should be doing that. But maybe because he will start to expect that of him if he does it. And as the master, if the master will do it, then certainly the student will do it. And maybe he didn't want to do it. And I think to myself in this moment, Peter not only didn't see the extraordinary at work, he not only didn't see it, he resisted it. He refused it. It was right in front of him, and he could not receive it. And I think to myself, I wonder how often I not only don't see extraordinary, but I resist it too. You know, sometimes I don't want to be last. I want to be first. Sometimes I don't want to serve. I want to be served. Sometimes I don't want to be overlooked. I want to be acknowledged. I want to be celebrated. I want to be championed. That's not extraordinary. What's extraordinary is when you have a group of people who are sitting around a table, who are acting just like everybody else, refusing to do what begged to be done. And you, in your status, in your state, Christ the Lord, think nothing of becoming a slave or a servant to those people that you've been serving for most of the rest of your adult life. Sometimes we not only miss the extraordinary, we resist it. Think of those times over the course of even this past week where you had an opportunity to do something that anybody or everybody could have done but didn't do. And you didn't do it because you were waiting for somebody else to do it. Because you thought it beneath you. Because you just didn't feel like it. And I think to myself in this moment, you know, you can look back and you can make commentary about what Peter did or didn't do or said or didn't say. It's almost laughable, right? He wants a bath now. First he didn't want even his feet to be washed. Now he's asking Jesus to give him a bath. And Jesus is like, hold on, dude. I just want your stinky feet out of your friend's face. You don't need a bath, okay? You can take a bath. And he says, you don't get what I'm doing now, but someday you will. Someday, the seed of what I'm saying to you will have lodged its place in a place in your heart that will spring forth into new life. And it will change you when you act on it. You will have thought all of those days and weeks and months and years, there was nothing. And then all of a sudden, there will be life where there wasn't life. There will be humility. There will be generosity. There will be kindness of spirit that didn't exist previously. And you're going to remember where you saw it. You're going to remember where you got it. Because you can't ever give something away that you haven't first received. It is extraordinary what's happening in this room. Just before, now think about it, Jesus is getting ready to be taken into custody. He's getting ready to be persecuted, beaten, whipped, tortured, mocked, cursed, crucified, betrayed, denied, left, abandoned. He's getting ready. He knows all of these things, and yet he's still willing to be a humble servant to the very people who would betray, deny, and forsake him. Sometimes we say, well, I'll serve this person, but I'm not going to serve that person. Well, I'll humble myself with this person, but I'm not going to. I'll be generous towards this, but not when we make exceptions. I don't think there's any exception here. In the recording of this story, there is no bypassing of anyone, even knowing who they are and what they do. What is extraordinary is that he does it anyway. Who would do such a thing? Would you? He calls us to walk in the same way. He doesn't call us just to believe in him. He calls us to follow him. Why? Because when we do, his kingdom comes, his will is done. And little by little, we're changed. And the people that we interact with are. And the world around us is. And you know what? It's extraordinary. Because it stands apart from all the other stuff that we see all the time going on. It's like everybody else. Let's finish the story. Verse 12. After washing their feet, he put on his robe again, and he sat down and he asked, he said, "Do you understand what I was doing?" And I can imagine him like, "No, I don't understand, I don't get it." He said, "You call me teacher and Lord, and you are right, because that is what I am. Since I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. I have given you an example to what? Follow. Do as I have done to you. I tell you the truth, slaves are not greater than their masters, nor is the messenger more important than the one who sends the message. Now that you know these things, God will bless you for doing them." You know what stands out to me here is that I'm pretty sure they didn't believe him. Because if they would have believed him, they would have rushed to be the first ones to do the serving of washing. But because they're always having these side arguments about, like, who's going to have the most power in the new kingdom? Who's going to be in control? Who's going to call the shots? Who's going to be most important? Who's going to sign the most autographs? Who's going to be the man? They did not realize that that is not the way of blessing. And we oftentimes get confused and think there's a certain way in which a God-blessed life will look. And Jesus always seems to just turn it on its head and say, you know what? The God-blessed life isn't always as you think it is. In fact, as he finishes this conversation with him, he says, now that you know the things you have seen and heard, God will bless you for doing them. Which is great, because not only do you bless someone else when you act in the way that he has shown, but you actually also are blessed. It's like multiplying. It's like, so you're around the house and you wanted your kids to pick up their dirty clothes. And you've been after them and on them time and time again because you're trying to teach them something. But the way in which you're trying to teach them, you're going about it the wrong way. Right? I've had this happen to me. I've learned by mistake so many times with trying to correct my children, with trying to be in a relationship with somebody where I was trying to teach them, but trying almost like to bully them into doing the right thing. When in fact, if maybe the model looked more like Jesus' humble servant model, maybe, just maybe, they might see that and might pick it up and take it on and put it on for themselves. You know what I mean? There's so many times where I want to lord over someone or a situation because I can. And then I'll think about the story and I'll think about what Jesus did, and I think to myself, that's where the blessing is. Because I never feel good. I can honestly say I never feel good in my spirit. I never feel lifted in my spirit when I'm trying to bully or lord over someone or something because I can. It never feels good or right. I may just want the situation to be done, or I may just want it to go a certain way. But I always just feel undone by it in the end. There is some conviction that says, this doesn't look at all like the one you say you're following. And so blessing comes when you act, not just believe, but you act like the one you follow. And that person that you serve in that way sees in a very real way Christ. And whether or not it impacts them or does anything to them in the immediacy of that moment, I bet if you stay at it, they'll take note. And the reason that I believe that is because it's extraordinary. And extraordinary stands out. Over time, nobody does that. Not with the right spirit. I mean, I can see Jesus grabbing their feet, and right? That isn't how he did it, right? Knuckleheads, you should have done this and given them a lecture and made judgment on them about how they messed up. Let me show you how it's done, right? You don't get the sense that that's how it worked out, right? He did it with a different spirit. And so, you can do the right thing in a wrong way and still not be right. You know what I'm saying? And from a moral high ground, you can look down at the person who messed up or that you were trying to correct or whatever it was. Not only is it right action, it's right motivation, it's right spirit. Jesus says when you live your life in such a way, you will be what? Don't you want to be blessed? And you know what? It's not just reserved for people who have a lot of money. It's not just reserved for the beautiful people of the world, for the most athletic, for the most powerful. It's actually open to you and me and everybody. Everybody. The blessed life. The blessed life. No matter how much money you have. No matter what you look like. No matter where you're from. No matter how much you've messed up along the way. The blessed life, it's right there. It's an extraordinary life. Jesus says, I give it to you. He says that when you walk in it, what you're going to find is that your life is richer and fuller and deeper and more meaningful. You just have to try. You just have to try. And so we get to the end of today, and what I want to say is I don't know what you're envisioning in your mind as what the God-blessed life looks like, but I just want you to re-envision perhaps maybe from the perspective of the one who's showing us how, that maybe what it is that you're thinking about, maybe what it is that you're pursuing, it might be just a tad off course. Maybe if where you are, you will just, when you walk into a room, look for an opportunity to serve, to wash feet, to be humble, to be generous, to be kind. If maybe every room you walk into, you're looking for that opportunity, maybe what you'll find is blessing. Somebody didn't pick up the trash, you pick it up. Somebody didn't clean the stinky floor, you clean it up. Somebody didn't do the work that was needed to be done at work, you take care of it and do it. And don't go tell somebody that you did it so that they're going to think what a great person you are. You just do it. Between you and God, you just do it. Do it with a good, right spirit. And I bet if you do it enough, you'll find blessing. Because you're going to be becoming like the one you're following. Because it's always disjointing to believe in someone or something, but to have your life out of whack and think of anything. But if you align it, there's fullness of blessing. There's joy. There's peace. Every single one of us who calls ourselves by the name Christian, when we don't act like the Christ, we feel it. And all I'm saying is, perhaps, we just take a page out of his book and we reorient ourselves to what it means to be extraordinary. Because every single one of you has the capacity to be extraordinary with your life. When it's all said and done, if you choose that way, the legacy that you leave will be greater than the one you think you could leave if you had just a little bit more money. If you had just a little bit more power. Think about Mother Teresa. She gave all that away. She became known for her poverty of spirit, for her humility, for being willing to do what nobody else would do with the dying and the sick. She became world famous. She rubbed shoulders and elbows with presidents and prime ministers and popes. For what? For being humble and for serving the poor in the state. Sometimes we get what we want, and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have a dream about what our life's going to be, and sometimes it becomes altogether something different. Just because our lives don't end up aligning with what we thought we would have, doesn't mean that our life can't be extraordinary. It can be extraordinary. I saw it from a 12-year-old recently, and I saw it from a very poor elderly woman recently. It all depends on whether or not you believe what Jesus says. And that is, to do it is where the blessing is, not just to believe it. To do it is where the blessing is. I pray every day, in one way or another, that I would become more like Christ. It's my hope. It's what I want more than anything else. More than anything else. And I think that if that becomes the kind of people that we are seeking to be like, that God will help us in that way. What would it mean to be a person of extraordinary character? Wouldn't you like to find out? It's right there for you. When everybody else will refuse or resist, it's right there for you to do. Don't think you're too good. Don't think you're better than Jesus. We are not. He shows us the way. Blessed is the one who follows him. Amen? So let's do that today. I bet today, even before you leave this place, you're going to get a chance. Have eyes to see, and ears to hear, and a willingness to respond. Even if nobody else sees it, notices it, appreciates it, celebrates you for it, because it's the Jesus way. It's the right way. It's no small. Let's pray. Extraordinary character. I want it more than anything else. I want a lot of things, God. I do want you to know I want a lot of things. Help me to be more like your Son. Help us. Thank you for the opportunities to practice today. For the opportunities that will come our way. I pray that you would give us eyes to see and ears to hear, and a willingness to humble ourselves and do what is asked for in any given situation. That we may know blessing and that we may bring blessing.